I'm Darren Dito with KSN News. I'll be your moderator tonight for the debate between Senator Pat Roberts and his independent challenger, Greg Orman. Now, as we get started, here are tonight's rules. Each candidate will have a minute and a half for opening remarks. Each person will have 1 minute to answer each question from our panel, as well as a 30-second rebuttal. We'll end with minute and a half closing remarks from each of the candidates. The panel consists of our media partners for tonight's debate. We have Brian Lowry from the Wichita Eagle, Dr. Bob Beatty from the KSNT in Topeka, Tim Carpenter from the Topeka Capital Journal, and Greg Andrus from KSN News. Now, candidates were not given the questions or topics before tonight's debate. We also want you to follow along. You can send us questions to hashtag KSDebate, and we'll be picking some of those questions tonight to ask the candidates. But let's get started right now with our opening remarks. We did do a coin toss before the debate, and Mr. Orman will get to go first and get the first question from our panel. Mr. Orman, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, and thank you to everyone at home who's watching tonight. Washington's broken. We all know it. We're sending the worst of both parties there. Bitter partisans who care more about pleasing the extremists and the special interests in their own party than they do about solving problems. They draw childish lines in the sand and refuse to cooperate. As a result, inaction has replaced leadership in solving our most pressing issues. And we have serious issues to solve, from health care and higher education affordability, to stagnant wages, to living within our means as a country. I'm concerned that if we don't start solving these problems, our standard of living, our status in the world, and the very existence of the middle class in America is at risk. I've tried both parties, and like a lot of Kansans, I've been disappointed. Tonight, Senator Roberts is going to tell you that President Obama and Harry Reid are the reason Washington's such a mess. And you know what? He's half right. But the other half of the mess, Mitch McConnell and Pat Roberts. The truth is, both parties are more interested in playing games than solving problems, and both parties are failing Kansas. That's why I'm running for the U.S. Senate as an independent. I'm a fiscally responsible businessman who wants to go to Washington and focus on solutions, not party games. And I'll embrace the best ideas wherever they come from so that we can start solving problems again for the American people.
All right, thank you, Mr. Orman. Senator Roberts.
Thank you. America's at a crossroads. We're at a tipping point. And Kansans know they have a choice to make. They can make a choice between a trusted conservative Republican with integrity or my opponent, who is a liberal Democrat who still won't shoot straight with Kansas voters. It's pretty simple, folks. What this boils down to is a vote for Pat Roberts is a vote for a Republican majority in the Senate. End the Harry Reid agenda, end the gridlock, end the Obama-Reid agenda, replace what they have stood for with real jobs, real growth. My opponent cannot stand up to the Obama-Reid agenda. After all, he is a Democrat. He ran against me as a Democrat in 2008. And he gave contributions, $174,000, to Hillary Clinton, to Barack Obama, and yes, even Harry Reid. So by deed and by word and by campaign contribution, he cannot stand up to the Reid-Obama agenda. Now, it's just much more about this election than me. That's why we've had all members of the Republican Party come and endorse me, because they know the number one thing is to get a Republican majority in the United States Senate to end the gridlock and stop the Obama-Reid agenda.
Okay, thank you, Senator Roberts. Our first question tonight from the panel is from Brian Lowry of the Wichita Eagle.
Thank you. More than 66,000 children have been apprehended at the southern border unaccompanied by an adult since last October. What should the U.S. do with these children?
Well, you know, before I answer that question, I just have to address a couple of things that Senator Roberts said in his opening remarks. In fact, we've gotten to the point now where we're making up facts about the levels of contributions that I've given. He also said that all members of the Republican Party had endorsed him, while the traditional Republicans for Common Sense endorsed me, and numerous Republicans have endorsed me. So I think we need to look past those falsehoods and pay attention to what the truth is. In terms of the young adults and the children at our southern border, I think we need to address that at its source. I think we need to go to Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, and we need to talk to parents there. We need to advertise to them. We need to let them know, please do not send your children through that treacherous trip through Mexico to the United States, because when you get there, we're going to process them and we're going to send them home. And ultimately, that's the best way to ensure their safety. And so I think that's what we need to do in terms of trying to address that issue.
Thank you, Mr. Orman. Senator Roberts.
Well, the first thing we have to do is secure the border. The second thing that we have to do is, there is a bill that the House passed that changes the law and says that all other countries will be similar to that of Mexico and Canada. If you come across illegally, I'm sorry, you have to go back. Humanitarian repatriation. It was the president himself who said people 16 and under could stay that led to this onslaught, this humanitarian tragedy. But let me go back to the border. There should not be any amnesty. We have 167,000 convicted felons just admitted to by the Department of Homeland Security that are illegal in the United States. We have ISIS. We have Ebola. We have to secure the border, and we cannot have amnesty.
Real quick, a point of clarification, sir. He asked about the 66,000 children that have come up to the U.S. border. What are we going to do with all of them? We can shut down the border, but they're already there. What should the U.S. do moving forward with policy?
Well, obviously, they have been working through the system, and obviously you're not going to deport 66,000 children. But we have to secure the border to prevent other situations like that from happening again. And yes, we can work with the Central American countries to make sure that they understand that they're going to be like Mexico and Canada, and that they cannot do this kind of thing again. There's also the drug cartels involved just as well.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Orman, rebuttal.
Well, you know, first, I'm not sure what the senator said there, because in his first statement he said humanitarian deportations, and then in his next statement he said we shouldn't deport them. So I'm not clear what the answer was there. I do believe we need to secure the border, but I also believe we can secure the border and have a humane immigration policy. And I hope we get an opportunity throughout this debate to talk more about immigration, because I think it's an important issue for Kansas, particularly an important issue for Western Kansas.
Okay. Senator Roberts, rebuttal.
Well, you're not going to get any immigration policy as long as Harry Reid is the majority leader of the Senate. He uses immigration as a political tool. So until we put Harry Reid out to pasture and you get a Republican majority that can really consider immigration, but again, all this stops when you consider we have to secure the border. That is the first thing. And in addition, with Ebola, ISIS, or whatever, whoever comes across the border, the 167,000 illegals who are convicted felons, that shows you we have to secure the border, and we cannot support amnesty. My opponent supports amnesty.
Okay. Thank you, sir. All right. Our next question from the panel is from Dr. Bob Beatty of KSNT.
All right, let's talk specifics about possible immigration reform. If the U.S. were to create a pathway to citizenship for immigrants who entered the country illegally, what criteria should those immigrants meet to qualify for potential citizenship?
Senator Roberts.
Well, obviously we don't have that now, so we have to secure the border first. I mean, let me explain it one more time. The Department of Homeland Security just announced that 167,000 convicted felons have come across the border. They're somewhere in the United States. We have no idea where they are. Now, secondly, if you are going to deal with the immigration problem, you have to secure the border first. The House of Representatives sent a bill over to the Senate, which, by the way, the Senate is a place where good bills go to die, because Harry Reid will not allow any consideration. But that bill did two things. It gave money to secure the border and really secure the border, and it changes the law again, so that every country knows that it is the same law that applies to Canada and to Mexico, and that illegals, when you come across the border, you go back. If we do that, then we can get to immigration and all the complexities of that kind of bill. But first you have to secure the border.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Orman.
You know, I've talked at length from the beginning of this campaign about my policy on immigration. I believe our policy on immigration needs to be tough, practical, and fair. And by tough, I believe we need to secure the border. We've increased the number of border security agents there over the last 10 years from about 10,500 to 21,000, and I think we need to maintain that commitment. But then it needs to be practical. I don't think we are going to find and deport 11.5 million people, nor would it be economically advisable. There are whole industries in Kansas, the dairy industry, the meat packing industry, the agricultural sector would be absolutely decimated by such a policy. So how do we make it fair to taxpayers? I think we make it fair to taxpayers by saying if you're here on an undocumented basis, you have to register with ICE by a date certain, you have to pay a fine or perform community service as an acknowledgement that you've broken the law. You need to hold down a job, pay taxes, and obey our laws, and then I think you should be able to stay here and work. By the way, I will point out this is the same plan that 14 Republican senators signed on to, including many that came here to support Senator Roberts.
Rebuttal, Senator Roberts?
Again, you're not going to make any progress with regards to immigration as long as the majority leader, Harry Reid, stays in power. Now, President Obama has threatened, or at least it's been reported in the press, that he could, by executive order, yet another executive order, declare amnesty for illegal aliens, and also his total immigration policy. Now, that is something that I think is absolutely wrong, and it involves securing the border and amnesty before anything else, no amnesty before anything else can happen. My opponent cannot stand up to the Obama-Reid agenda. He would vote for that.
Okay, but let's get a rebuttal now from Mr. Orman.
You know, as I've said throughout this campaign, I do not support amnesty. You've just heard my immigration policy, and it ends with allowing people to work here who are here today and follow a certain set of rules. With that said, Senator Roberts wants to talk about how the Senate is the place where bad bills go to die or good bills go to die. I don't remember exactly what he said, but the Senate is actually the only body that acted on immigration reform. 14 Republican senators, including John McCain and Lindsey Graham, approved it, and it's still not happening. I would also stand up and say that President Obama shouldn't act by executive action, but that's what's wrong with Washington today. Nothing gets done.
Okay, thank you. Senator, let me ask you real quick. I know you answered securing the border. If these people are already in the country now, do we need to change our policies? Like, if they're going to be working in the system already, what would you do with all these folks that are already here? You can't really deport thousands.
No, I've never said that we should deport 11,000 people. That's impossible. But I do think that we ought to obey the law. And I do think that we should say no to amnesty. Now, my opponent in the first debate in Hutchinson said he was for amnesty. He will say time and time again that he didn't say that.
All right.
Watch the tape, Greg.
Yes, sir. All right. Our next question is from Mike Carpenter of the Capital Journal.
Thank you. In regards to foreign policy, first, were the U.S. invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq justified? A simple yes or no. And second, outline your preferred response to the new ISIS threat.
Well, in terms of Afghanistan, yes, I think we needed to do something there to root out the Muslim extremists there and make sure that they didn't have a safe haven and a base to attack us again. In terms of the invasion in Iraq, I think time is now suggesting that we might not have been as thoughtful as we should have been before we went in there. And I think part of the challenge we have right now is we've spent thousands of lives, we've lost thousands of lives, we've had tens of thousands of people critically injured, we've spent hundreds of billions of dollars and will spend hundreds of billions of dollars more if we honor our commitment to our veterans, all in an effort to prevent Muslim extremists from having a stronghold in the Middle East. And the vacuum in Iraq and the civil war in Syria is allowing them that. So I do think we need to be aggressive in terms of rooting out ISIS. I do believe we need to follow the air campaign that we're doing. We need to protect our diplomatic assets on the ground. And we need to train the Iraqis to be able to solve that problem in their country with our support.
Thank you, sir. Senator Roberts.
Afghanistan, yes. But I worry about Afghanistan because if the president repeats what he did with Iraq and not leaving a status of forces agreement, we're going to be in the same kind of situation. The real mistake with Iraq has been not having a status of forces agreement with Iraq. When we left it left a vacuum. And Maliki was not exactly the best with regards to leading that country. But now we have ISIS trying to establish a caliphate. And this really goes to a larger problem. This president has tried to lead by following with regards to national security and foreign affairs. When you lead by following, there's a vacuum. When there's a vacuum, bad people fill it. And if you don't deal with the bad people, then it gets worse, much worse. And that's where we are today. We have a situation in Iraq where just today the president said, we're winning with regards to ISIS. We're not. The ISIS savage terrorist group is within about 20 miles of the Baghdad airport. We have the Big Red One flag now in Baghdad. We have 450 members of the Big Red One there. We have 150 Marines there. Now, before we go any further, the president has to come back. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, you've reached your time. Let's hear rebuttal from Ms. Orman, then we will come back to you, Senator.
Thank you.
Well, again, I didn't hear an answer from Senator Roberts as to whether or not we should have gone into Iraq in the first place. I believe that we might have been a little bit overly optimistic to think that we were going to go in there and in 10 years we were going to take people who had been fighting for 15 centuries and form a properly functioning democracy. I believe that ISIS and the war against ISIS has got to change. It can no longer be considered a U.S. war against Muslims. It's got to be considered a Middle Eastern war to root out extremism. So we have to have more support from allies in the region, and we need to back them up to address this issue.
Thank you, sir. Senator Roberts?
What I was going to point out was that the president is conducting a war right now. From a constitutional standpoint, the Congress ought to weigh in. And the president ought to come to the Congress and explain also to the American people. If we're going to send more troops into Iraq to contain or destroy ISIS, and there is a bitter debate going on within the administration on what we should do, then the president has an obligation to come to Congress and the American people and explain what victory is. And he has not done that. He continues to say, we're going to stay put, we're going to do exactly what we're doing. Right now, we're losing with regards to Iraq and ISIS. And intelligence reports show that that is a very dangerous situation for our national security.
Let's go to our next question. Thank you, both. It is a social media question that was sent in. It's from Keith Ashley. We're going to start with Senator Roberts. How do you think the United States should deal with the Ebola epidemic? How should we deal with the Ebola epidemic? Senator Roberts.
Well, again, the Ebola epidemic, along with ISIS, shows you how we should really secure the border and not be granting amnesty. But I issued a statement just a couple of days ago. Why can't we do now what we know what we're going to have to do down the road? And that is to have a quarantine on West Africa, stop the plane traffic, the air traffic from West Africa to the United States. We also ought to get our best and brightest over to that country just as fast as we can. The World Health Organization just said that if we do not take action within the next 60 days, we could lose 10,000 people a week. That's a humanitarian disaster. But again, this all goes back to ISIS, Ebola, and the other problems that we see on the border. We must secure the border and secure the national security of our fellow Americans.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Orman?
You know, Ebola is obviously a serious issue, and I think we need to have a serious, coordinated public health response to it that does include sending the best and the brightest over to West Africa to deal with that problem. I also believe that we should suspend air travel with West Africa for the time being until the crisis is contained. But this goes back to sort of a crisis in leadership. You know, Senator Roberts has come back and has made some very strong statements about Ebola when he's back in Kansas, but it just came out the other day that when he was in Washington last month, he skipped a hearing on the Ebola virus. And so I think it's inappropriate to talk tough here, and yet when you had an opportunity to do something about it, Senator, you chose to skip the hearing, and I think that's a real problem for Kansans.
Rebuttal, Senator Roberts.
The hearing was held out of session during September. It was held on the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee. Nothing of substance came of it. We have a crisis of leadership, all right, with regards to this whole situation. I think the administration, more especially the president, again, has been 2 steps behind and asleep at the wheel. We ought to do now He just said that this was that he will have a much more aggressive program. We don't know what it is, of course, yet, but we're going to have a much more aggressive program. It is the President that I think that we have to look to for this kind of leadership, and we're looking for his plan or his strategy. We don't know it yet. We have to do this, and we have to do it now.
Sir, your time. Let's rebuttal. Mr.
Well,
Orman.
you know, again, the crisis in leadership in Washington is on both sides of the aisle. And Senator, while you didn't attend the hearing on Ebola, it's also come out that you didn't attend 2 out of 3 hearings in the Agriculture Committee, a committee that you want to lead someday. And so I think that crisis of leadership is a crisis of leadership that you share in too, sir.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Our next question comes now from Craig Andrews from KSN News.
Well, Senator Roberts, Mr. Orman, both of you have spent a good chunk of your adult lives outside the state of Kansas. You both own homes in other states. Please discuss your sense of connection with Kansas.
Mr. Orman?
Well, you know, I did grow up in southern Minnesota, but my father has owned a furniture store in Kansas since 1971, and I spent a lot of time as a teenager here in Kansas, working in a store, learning the value of a dollar, learning Kansas values. When I got the opportunity to move back to Kansas in 1996, I took it, and ultimately, my friends are here, my family's here. I choose to be a Kansan. I'm a Kansan. Maybe most importantly, my wife is a lifelong Kansan, and her mother lives here. So if you're wondering where I'm going to spend my time, I'm going to be spending my time in Kansas.
Okay, Senator Roberts.
I spent most of my life in Kansas. I'm a 4th-generation Kansan. Dodge City is my home, and I'm very proud of it, despite all the hoorah about it. And let me say that I've been border to border and corner to corner in all 105 counties time and time and time again. There is no public official in the history of the state of Kansas that has been in more communities talking to more people about the issues that they're worried about with their future and their daily lives and their pocketbooks than I have. Bob Dole jokes he's trying to catch up with me. So basically, I know Kansas. I know Kansas is conservative. I know Kansas wants answers to people who are will not repeal or replace Obamacare, that will restrict the First and Second Amendment, that basically will not support the Keystone Pipeline. All positions taken by my opponent, because he is in fact a liberal Democrat, not an independent.
Rebuttal, Mr. Orman?
You know, I say a lot, we don't live in the information age anymore so much as we live in the misinformation age. And what you heard there was a series of misinformation from Senator Roberts. I'm happy to address them one at a time if we have that opportunity during the debate. But what I would also suggest is I care more about the way someone votes. And Senator Roberts, in your case, you come back and you talk about supporting farmers, and you voted against the Farm Bill. You talk about supporting veterans, and yet you didn't even have the courage to go to Washington and vote on the VA reform bill. I think that's more important, and I think Kansans know that.
Rebuttal, Senator?
In the Farm Bill, we achieved the #1 priority of farmers and ranchers in Kansas. That was crop insurance. Yes, I voted against the Farm Bill because it was, once again, we're seeing farmers now farm for the government as opposed to the market. I have received the endorsement from the Kansas Farm Bureau, the Kansas Livestock Association, and every other major farm organization. They endorse me, not my opponent. So in every case, I have been the champion for farmers and ranchers in Kansas.
Okay, thank you both for your answers. Before we move forward with our next question, just a reminder to the folks at home, send us your questions online. You can tweet them to us at #KSDebate, and we may read your question on air tonight. All right, back to our panel now. The next question is from Brian Lowry of the Wichita Eagle.
The aviation industry in Wichita has seen a 37% decline in employment since October 2008. Can this industry be saved in Wichita? If so, what role should Washington play?
Senator?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Easy. Stop aviation taxes. This administration and the president, who refers to general aviation as fat cat corporate jets, I reminded him of that in the city where his mother is from. 27,000 jobs are involved with regards to aviation. Aviation industry can get along fine, except for this administration again and again trying to put aviation taxes on the aviation industry. It's not so much what Washington can do for you as what they can do against you. So consequently, I have been the champion of general aviation. Every time the president said fat cat corporate jets, I was down on the floor saying, sorry, this is a general aviation industry, that's not right. We even had a personal discussion about it.
Mr. Orman.
Well, you know, as the only person on this stage to actually create a private sector job, I think I'm probably uniquely qualified to talk about what private sector businesses need. And I've put forward my small business plan, and in that plan I talk about a number of things. Number one, we need to roll back the Dodd-Frank regulations on community banks and regional banks. They weren't the people involved in causing our financial industry to reach the brink of disaster. We shouldn't be punishing them and punishing companies that serve industries like the aviation industry. We've also talked about rolling back regulations and having a review of regulations every 10 years and requiring them to come back for an up or down vote in front of Congress to make sure that the kind of regulations that we're imposing on businesses are doing what they're intending to do and not stifling innovation. And so I think those are some of the things that we need to do for businesses in general, and I think they will help the aviation sector in Kansas as well.
All right, thank you, sir. Rebuttal, Senator Roberts.
Well, job creation. Job creation indeed. My opponent was the recipient of a $3 million grant, taxpayer money, to start a shrimp farm in the middle of the desert in Nevada. I think the supposition was that somehow people ate so many shrimp cocktails in Vegas, of which he spent much of his adult life, that they would have a shrimp farm in the middle of Nevada. That is a grant of $3 million, and I would like for him to explain that. I have the endorsement of the National Federation of Independent Business. I have the endorsement of the Chamber of Commerce.
Okay, well, here's your chance. Let's address the shrimp farm in the middle of the desert, if you will.
You know, I'm proud of my private sector track record of creating jobs and opportunities for people and value for shareholders. I've been involved with, as an investor, in over 40 businesses. Senator Roberts is just revealing the fact that he spent the last 47 years in Washington because he doesn't realize not every business succeeds. Not every business is a success. If they were, everybody would be running big businesses and we'd all be successful. We do run into these issues. I am proud of my private sector track record, and I'll compare it to the senators anytime.
Okay. Well, we also asked each candidate a question that a lot of you have been asking. For Senator Roberts, we asked him about his residency. And for Mr. Orman, we asked him about his personal wealth and how regular Kansans can relate to him. Now, you can find their answers to those questions on our websites. They are ksn.com, kansas.com, ksnt.com, and cjonline.com. All right, let's go back to our panel now with a question from Dr. Bob Beatty of KSNT.
Yes, I have a glass half full question here. Last month, the U.S. economy added 248,000 jobs. Unemployment fell to 5.9%, the lowest since July of 2008. So what has the U.S. government done right since the Great Recession of 2008? And what should it continue to do going forward to keep this recovery going?
Mr. Orman, let's start with you.
Well, I think the challenge that we've had with this recovery is while we're creating jobs, we're not necessarily creating middle-class jobs. And I've talked a lot about how we get this country started again. First and foremost, we've got to get Washington back into the business of solving problems. I can't tell you how many business owners that I've talked to who have said, we need to deal with health care affordability. If we could just have an honest and meaningful discussion about how to address health care affordability in this country and change the incentives to drive costs out of the system, we would be in a far better position to create jobs and see wages grow. I've heard people tell me we need to deal with immigration reform. A number of businesses have suggested to me that they would add jobs if we simply got Congress and the President to get their act together and pass some sort of immigration reform that gives them certainty. And we also have to get the government out of the way, and that's why we put forward our small business plan to help get regulations out of the system and help businesses grow again.
Thank you, sir. Senator Roberts?
Well, I was going to go into sometime back in one of the other questions. I have the endorsement of the National Federation of Independent Business. These are the folks that represent all the small businesses up and down the state, and also the Chamber of Commerce. And the Chamber of Commerce takes a look at your record, and we also meet with all the chambers in Kansas. They give those issues to the National Chamber, and they score you on real job growth, on less regulation, on less spending, on providing certainty to the best that we can with the Obama-Reid agenda and the Obama-Reid administration. They endorsed me. Not only did they endorse me, reflecting all the chambers in Kansas and all the small businesses in Kansas, but they took the extra step of defining my opponent and his record and his record of job creation as a liberal Democrat. That's what they did.
Would you like to respond to that in rebuttal?
Well, I've never heard of anyone defining someone's job creation record in liberal or conservative terms, and I think the senator is misstating once again. And frankly, Senator, it feels a little desperate, and it feels like something that's beneath you to stand up here and misrepresent the facts. I've met with chambers throughout the state, and I can tell you from those firsthand meetings that there are a number of chambers in the state that would love to see me get elected to the United States Senate.
Okay, thank you, sir. Senator Roberts?
Well, name them if you can, but the National Chamber,
Be happy to.
in their endorsement of me, and the National Federation of Independent Business, in their endorsement of me, took the extra step again of defining my opponent as a liberal Democrat. It's basically on the issues with regarding to certainty for business and the Obama-Reid agenda and all of the regulations that have come out of that administration. We're drowning in regulations. You mentioned agriculture. My Lord, we have the prairie chicken, we have waters of the U.S., we have so many different regulations that you can't keep up. One farmer told me, we're not being governed, we're being ruled. And they're the ones that took a look. Your job creation, sir, not only the shrimp farm, but also going to the Grand Caymans.
Okay, all right. Let's go back to our panel. Thank you both for your responses. Appreciate it. The next question now is from Mike Carpenter of the Capital Journal.
Both of you have mentioned the Affordable Care Act this evening. I believe you've indicated that it is flawed in some manner. How should the federal government intervene in the health insurance market to control costs without restricting access?
Senator?
Well, number one, once again, you're not going to have any repeal or replacement of the Affordable Health Care Act with Harry Reid acting as the majority leader. And I believe that we should repeal and replace the Affordable Health Care Act. My opponent will not do that. He also will, he is for amnesty, I am not. He wants to restrict the First and Second Amendments, I do not. He is against the Keystone Pipeline, I'm not, and the list goes on. He is pro-abortion, I'm not. These are the kinds of issues that I think the Chamber of Commerce again took a look at and said he is a liberal Democrat by deed, by word, and by campaign contributions. So on the Affordable Health Care Act, I think we have to repeal and replace it, more market-oriented solutions. We have to end this assault with higher premiums, lost insurance, interference with the doctor-patient relationship, many doctors quitting. The list goes on. Not to mention rationing boards in Washington. So the first step, repeal and replace it, and you will get that with a Republican majority.
Okay, let's hear, you're out of time, sir. Let's hear from Mr. Orman now.
Well, you know, I've said this a lot in this campaign. I actually believe that President Obama and Harry Reid are part of the problem, but I also believe, Senator, you're part of the problem too. You've been in Washington for 47 years. During that period of time, the number of undocumented people in this country has grown from 1 million to over 11.5 million. Our debt has grown from under $1 trillion to over $18 trillion. In the last decade, you even voted to support funding for the Bridge to Nowhere in Alaska. As it relates to the Affordable Care Act, I've been very clear on this from the beginning. I didn't support the Affordable Care Act when it was passed. In fact, the senator wants to talk about my campaign contributions. In 2010, I gave a campaign contribution to Scott Brown, who was supposed to be the deciding vote against the Affordable Care Act. And the reason I didn't like it is because I thought the Affordable Care Act was expanding a broken system. We pay for quantity in this country and not for quality. We need to fundamentally change the incentives so that we can deliver better quality care at a lower price.
Thank you, sir. Senator Roberts, rebuttal?
My opponent's friend, Harry Reid, the person he contributed money to, and his president, President Obama, who he voted for and contributed money to, described the Affordable Health Care Act as the first step toward national health insurance. That is the wrong way to go. You must repeal it first, replace it with more market-oriented solutions. You will not get there from here unless you elect a Republican majority in the United States Senate. Working with the House, we can do that. The Senate has passed bill after bill after bill that would be helpful with regards to replacing Obamacare. Those bills have died.
Let's hear from Mr. Orman, sir, about that.
Yeah. Well, you know, again, as I said from the beginning, I wasn't an initial supporter of the Affordable Care Act, and I don't believe it was the right decision. But right now, what we have is a health care affordability issue in this country. We had it before the Affordable Care Act. We had it today. And this is just what you see in Washington. Instead of talking about how to address the issue of health care affordability, we take an issue like the Affordable Care Act and we try to make it a political football. And ultimately, it prevents them from having to make the hard decisions that we need to make to secure Americans' future financially.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Before we go forward, Tim, my apologies. I'm not sure where Mike came from. I was thinking of baseball, I think, at that time. Let's go back now to Craig Anders from KSN with our next question.
Gentlemen, an abortion question. Before an abortion in Kansas, a woman must have an ultrasound with the option of viewing the image, get counseling, and then wait 24 hours. Do you agree with these regulations, and should ultrasounds before abortions be mandated nationwide?
You know, I've addressed this issue many times before, and what I've said on this issue is, as a man, I'm never going to have to face the hard decisions that women have to face. I trust that the women of Kansas are smart and they can make decisions on their own about their own reproductive health. With that said, I think we spend a whole lot of time in this country talking about this issue, and we have spent a whole lot of time over the last couple of decades talking about it. And I think it prevents us from talking about other important issues. And what I'd like to see us do is start focusing on some of the big problems that we absolutely need to get our arms around if we're going to preserve the American dream and our financial futures.
Well, let me ask you real quick. So are you pro-life or pro-choice?
I'm pro-choice.
You're pro-choice. Okay. Senator?
I think he's obviously pro-choice. I'm pro-life. I think you said that we have to get past this issue. If I'm correct, get past the rights of the unborn, get past the guarantee of life for those at the end of life. I don't think you can say that with any degree of conscience, more especially as I'm concerned. The question that was raised is really a state issue. Federal mandates, I don't know of almost any federal mandate that I agree with now, with all the paperwork and regulations coming out of Washington and taking over states' rights. But with abortion, and you're going to have to move past it, I think that's unconscionable, Greg, I really do.
Okay. Mr. Orman?
You know, Justice Roberts, when he was in his confirmation hearing, referred to this issue as settled law. I think it is it's an important question, no question about it. I just think we've spent a lot of time as a country debating it, and it's time to start debating other important issues as well.
Thank you, sir. Senator Roberts?
Well, it isn't settled law because we had a great fight over Hobby Lobby, didn't we? And the rights of individual business people to say that, I'm sorry, we're not going to accept Obamacare because it strikes at our religious beliefs. And the Hobby Lobby won. And so it isn't settled law, but not by a long shot. That's why I am proud to receive the endorsement from the National Right to Life and the Kansans for Life. They support me, and I'll tell you one thing, they don't think that we ought to get past this issue.
Okay, let's go back to social media with our next question. Jeremy Faust asked us via Twitter, I'd like to know the candidate's stance on gun control and if you are a gun owner. And let's start with Senator Roberts with this question, please.
I am not a gun owner. The last gun I had was an M1 in the United States Marine Corps. My opponent supported a Harry Reid piece of legislation that would have been tearing apart the First Amendment. And neither Harry Reid or my opponent looks very good in the James Madison wig. And the Second Amendment. Now, I am a protector of the First and Second Amendment. My opponent is not. That's one of the many issues that proves again he is a liberal Democrat and he is not an independent. So, First Amendment, freedom of speech, all of you gentlemen should be concerned about that. Harry Reid's bill would have had the Congress decide what happens with regards to all campaign contributions. Imagine that, with Chuck Schumer and Harry Reid. That was the wrong thing to do, Greg. And in the Second Amendment, I strongly support the right to bear arms, and I'm very pleased that I have the support of the Kansas State Rifle Association and the NRA.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Orman.
First, a couple of things. Number one, the First Amendment thing that Senator Roberts is referring to is overturning Citizens United. And obviously, he doesn't want to overturn Citizens United because his buddies from Washington have flown in and are now spending millions of dollars in campaign ads attacking me in a desperate attempt to allow him to stay in office. I am a gun owner. I have 2 guns. When I bought those guns, I had to go through a background check. And I don't believe it was intrusive. I don't believe it intruded on my Second Amendment rights. I support the Second Amendment. And I would point out that what I've talked about in terms of ending the gun show loophole is the same law that Senator Roberts in the past has said he supported. But when he found himself in the middle of a difficult primary and when he realized the direction his party was heading, he changed his tune. And he flip-flopped on that issue. So as a gun owner, I do believe in and I do support the Second Amendment.
Thank you, sir. Rebuttal, Senator Roberts.
Well, I'm 64 out of 64 votes on right to life. The NRA, I can't tell you where I am. It's probably about 94, 95, 96%. That is, the way you describe that situation, I don't think that's accurate. I have always supported the Second Amendment, and I will continue to do so.
All right, thank you, sir. Rebuttal?
You know, again, I'm just here.
Are we rebutting the rebuttal?
Well, it is Mr. Orman's rebuttal.
Do I get a rebuttal to his rebuttal to my rebuttal?
No, you had 30 seconds. You only took 15. If you can speak for 15 seconds more, go ahead.
I'm just concerned about we're getting rebuttals to rebuttals to rebuttals to rebuttals.
No, we're right on cue. We got a full stack of questions.
Got you.
Folks at home want to find out. Sir, you still
You
have
bet.
some time.
I'm not opposed to
Let's
that.
let Mr. Orman go ahead. Continue, sir.
Again, as a gun owner, I support the Second Amendment. I do support expanding background checks to cover gun shows. If you think about what a background check does, is it prevents someone who's been adjudicated to be mentally incompetent, is subject to a domestic restraining order, has been dishonorably discharged from the military, or ultimately sentenced to more than a year or more in jail from getting a gun. Those are people I don't want to see having guns. With that said, for law-abiding citizens who are willing to go through a background check, I support their right to keep and bear arms.
Okay, thank you both for your responses. Let's go back to the panel now. The next question is from Brian Lowry from the Wichita Eagle.
Kansas ranks as one of the top 5 states most affected by drought, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture. What role should the federal government play in helping Kansas and similar states achieve water sustainability?
Let's start with Mr. Orman.
First, what I've talked about in that regard, and I've spent a lot of time in western Kansas, I've spent a lot of time with folks talking about the Ogallala Aquifer and the issues associated with water in western Kansas. It's clearly a depleting resource. And so I think we need to do a couple of things in that regard. Number one, we need to make sure that federal policy isn't discouraging the planting of low water intensity crops. And in talking to farmers in western Kansas, what I've heard is the reason they don't plant sorghum in a lot of instances is because the crop insurance for it is 4 times as expensive as for some other crops. And so I think we need to look at federal policy and make sure that we're not discouraging the planting of low water intensity crops. I also think we need to lean on the innovation of the farm community. We've seen a lot of improvements in irrigation technology, and I'd like to see those irrigation technologies expanded so that we can conserve water and ultimately extend the resource that we have in western Kansas for agriculture.
All right, thank you, sir. Senator Roberts?
Well, it's interesting. The only federal response we've had from this administration is when the president went out to California and discovered the drought. He spent $1 billion, or said he wanted $1 billion, for 7 climate change centers. We've never really figured out what a farmer would do if he went into a climate change center as opposed to the Farm Service Agency that we have in almost every county. I represented the 1st District for 16 years. I come from western Kansas in terms of my home. Rest assured, I know what farmers want, but I certainly do not want another federal regulation or mandate coming down telling farmers based on water usage what they should plant and what they should not plant. We already have that too much in the federal government with the latest farm bill that is more, once again, having farmers plant for the government and not for the market.
Mr. Orman?
Well, I have come out, and as a small business owner myself, I recognize that government getting deeply involved in businesses is a mistake, which is why I have my small business plan that's intended to roll back regulations. With that said, we currently have a crop insurance program, and that program right now provides for premiums that farmers have to pay. If they have to pay more to insure something, they're less likely to plant it. And my concern is I don't want to discourage farmers from planting low water intensity crops because I think it would be good for western Kansas.
All right, thank you, sir. Senator.
We just had one heck of a time in the last farm bill putting together, saving, and improving crop insurance. And here you go, messing around with water usage and telling farmers what they can plant and what they can't plant, which will also directly involve the crop insurance program that we improved. I'm the father of crop insurance in the Senate, along with Senator Kerry of Nebraska. It was a bipartisan effort. And we improved it, we saved it in the Farm Bill. It was the #1 priority. And when we did crop insurance, I didn't hear anybody saying that somebody could come out from the federal government and say, but due to your water usage, we're going to encourage you to go to a different crop.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Let's go back to our panel. Next question is from Dr. Bob Beatty from KSNT.
Sure, let's keep talking about this. You know, Washington, D.C. looks to Kansas congresspeople and senators for expertise on farm issues. So considering that one of you will go to Washington, D.C., what would each of you like to see in the next farm bill that is not in the current farm bill?
Let's start with Senator Roberts.
In the next farm bill, obviously you're going to have to go over the current farm bill and really see if it is working. Here in Wichita, the Farm Service Agency folks are meeting with a book that thick with regards to the Farm Bill, which I think headed in the wrong direction. But having said that, I think we need a real shake-up and an understanding of the Department of Agriculture. The production of agriculture means a lot. Farmers and ranchers mean a lot. All the businesses up and down Main Street mean a lot. 83% of the funding that is in the ag budget now goes to SNAP, or food stamps. This is a program that cries out for reform. This is another example of where my opponent will not support anything like that, because that is a primary concern of Barack Obama and Harry Reid. This program has exploded in spending. The cut was only 1%. It's going to cost over $800 billion in the next 10 years. I think we at least ought to stop to think about what we do with ag research, what we do with greater export programs, and have our exports and our...
Let's talk about that when you get your chance to rebuttal. Let's hear from Mr. Orman right now.
First, I think if you want to talk about the food stamp program, I think ultimately we need to see economic growth in this country, because we need to create the kind of jobs where people don't need to be on food stamps. And I've talked a lot in this election about how I think we have a new American paradox. How I believe that it's harder than ever for the average American to get ahead, and yet paradoxically easier to do nothing with your life. And I've talked about looking at those means-tested programs and asking one very simple question. Are they promoting upward mobility and accountability, or are they promoting complacency and dependency? If they're promoting complacency and dependency, I think we need to adjust them, we need to improve them. Ultimately, we may need to end them.
Okay.
But ultimately...
Let's hear from the senator then.
Well, my amendment during the Farm Bill would have cut $36 billion on eligibility and taking advantage of loopholes in the program. It was defeated largely by Harry Reid and the Democrats. And because President Obama would not go there. That's one of his chief programs. Again, you got to get back to production and agriculture and understand the farmer and rancher both feed not only this country, but a troubled and hungry world. We're going to have about 9 billion people on the planet in the next couple of decades. And our farmers and ranchers have to be looked at in that context and have the USDA pay more attention to them and their livelihood than some bloated program that cries out for reform. We will not get the reform, however,
let's hear from him. And our apologies, we took away 15 seconds. Sorry about that. Go ahead, Mr. Orman.
Well, and again, the way I was going to finish that statement was to say that we need to reform those programs so that they are encouraging upward mobility and not complacency and dependency. I would point out, Senator Roberts has raised our last debate. Or our first debate at the state fair. When I said that at our first debate, I actually got a thumbs up from him. Now we've got a different story. Apparently that doesn't make sense anymore.
Okay, we've come to the final question of the night, and it's actually going to come from me. And you only get 30 seconds to answer it, and there's no rebuttals. Listen closely. I'd like each candidate to say something nice about your opponent. Say something nice about your opponent. Let's start with you, Mr. Orman. What can you say nice about Senator Roberts?
I appreciate Senator Roberts' service to our country. I appreciate his service in the Marines, and I will have to say that every time I've had an opportunity to talk privately with the senator, he's been a gentleman with a great sense of humor.
Thank you, sir. Senator Roberts.
Well, Semper Fi, Greg. Marines take the hill. I would say that you are a very well-dressed opponent. I admire your accumulation of wealth. I have a little question about how you got there from here, but I think that's the American dream, and I would hope that we could make that possible for everybody up and down every small Kansas community. I think yours has been a little bit different. You have a very nice smile, and you're for the Royals.
That's true, too.
So you may disagree, but mutual respect. You seem to like each other. Okay, I believe we've come to the point of the debate where we're going to do our closing remarks. Is that correct? Yes, we are. Okay, we're going to start with Mr. Orman. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, and thank you to KSN and all the sponsors for having us here tonight, and everyone at home who took the time to listen. And thank you to my wife, Sybil, and my family for their continuing love and support. I think the question we have in front of us tonight is a simple one. Is Washington working? If you think that it is, I'm not your guy, but I believe the system is broken. And I believe that sending a senator back to Washington who's been there and part of that broken system for 47 years isn't the answer. I'm asking Kansans to join me tonight in sending a message to Washington that the status quo is no longer acceptable and Kansans deserve better. We're the country that put a man on the moon, that figured out how to harness the power of the atom, that took computers that used to fill a room and put them on the head of a pin. I believe that country and those people can solve any problem if they put their minds together and work together. But we won't get there if we keep electing bitter partisans instead of problem solvers. Change can be scary, but what frightens me is more of the same. What frightens me is two parties who seem more interested in seeing the other party fail than seeing our country succeed. This election is an opportunity for Kansas to send a message to partisans of both parties that if you don't roll up your sleeves, start solving problems, we will find people who will. It's an opportunity for us to send a message to the nation about what's right with Kansas. I'm asking for your vote on November 4th to send this historic message and help us get Washington back into the business of solving problems for every American.
Thank you, sir. Senator Roberts.
Well, thank you again to KNS and or KSN, pardon me. President Obama said about a week ago that this election was about a referendum on his policies, his program, and his agenda, his legacy, if you will. And that's certainly true. There is only one way that we are going to stop the Obama-Reid agenda, and that is to elect a Republican majority. Many different leaders across our party have come to my assistance and endorsed me, not because it's me, this is so much more about me, it's the future of the country. And they have endorsed me because they know that I will vote for a Republican majority in the dictatorship and the gridlock by Harry Reid and stop the Obama-Reid agenda. Now, about this time tomorrow night, my opponent is going to have dinner in New York at a $5,000 a plate fundraiser with George and, well, not George Soros, but the Soros family. And going with him is an endorsement by the AFL-CIO. So waving the AFL-CIO banner and going to a Soros fundraiser, I have never known the Soros family to endorse independents. They endorse liberal Democrats, and so does the AFL-CIO.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Roberts. Thank you to Mr. Orman. Thank you to Senator Roberts. A special thanks to our panel. Once again, Craig Andrews from KSN News, Tim Carpenter from the Capital Journal, Dr. Bob Beatty from KSNT, and also Brian Lowry from the Wichita Eagle. We will have much more on the Kansas Senate debate coming up on KSN News at 10. And remember, folks, get out there and vote. Thank you for joining us tonight.